coming to the lectures. Thank you to Marguerite for doing this for us again this year. I really appreciate it. And again, the fabulous time. It's a wonderful opera.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful day. Okay. So, Otello, one of Verdi's operas. I want to talk a little bit briefly about Verdi's background and a little bit about the background of this opera, because it really is kind of an interesting story about how this ended up being composed. Now, Verdi really was Italy's greatest opera composer. If you just wrote a letter to him and put on the envelope, G. Verdi, Italy, it would get to him. They would know exactly where to go. There was the famous Viva Verdi that people would cry out uncontrollably, but it also contained two meanings. One was, of course, the admiration for the composer, but the other was that the initials were a secret anti-Austrian code. Remember, Italy was not independent yet at this point. And so what it stood for was Vittoria Emanuele Re d'Italia. Yes, King Vittorio Emanuele of Italy, King of Italy. And most of his life, Verdi did use his operas to press for the expulsion of any foreign occupiers and for the unification of Italy. Well, this annoyed the Austrians, who ruled Milan and Venice at the time, also annoyed the Pope, who also held huge amounts of land in that area. So he was born October 9th or 10th in 1813. Now this is interesting. His name was Giuseppe Fortinino Francesco in Parma, all right? But because Parma was occupied under Napoleon forces, his birth certificate reads Joseph Fortuné François. So isn't that interesting? Even the native language, even your own name, was not allowed. In the official documents, it had to be in French. So he suffered much loss at a very early age. His sister died in 1833. And then, this is very heartbreaking, his infant daughter and son and wife, Margherita, he lost all of them within a few years, between 1838 and 1840. So he really experienced very deep tragedy of epic proportions. And how remarkable that he was able then to use that. He understood tragedy. He understood the human condition and suffering. And he put that into his music and was able to express so much with that. And it informed his creative life and his art. He did eventually have another serious relationship. There was a soprano, Giuseppina Strepponi, happened to be the first Abigail in Nabucco in 1842. She retired in 1846. 2 years later, started a personal relationship with Verdi. They lived together for 10 years, which was quite the scandal. And then they did get married in 1859. He died in 1901. 200,000 people attended the funeral. 200,000. Can you imagine a musician today, 200,000 people showing up for that? There was a choir of 800 who sang Va Pensiero, chorus from Nabucco. So, his career then was not just successful, but it was also remarkably long. Even still, there were bumps in the road. And after Aida was produced in 1871, he did decide to retire from composing and not write any more operas. All right, 8 years later, two friends approached him, the publisher Giulio Ricordi and the conductor Franco Faccio. Now, Ricordi didn't agree with this retirement business, all right? He considered it a waste of talent, and he was a publisher. He considered it a waste of profits, all right? So he had an interest. He definitely had a vested interest in this. So they plotted together. So they were having dinner with Verdi and his wife in Milan, and they just happened to mention Otello as a subject for the opera, and introduced the idea of working with the librettist Arrigo Boito. Now, Ricordi knew what he was doing. Verdi was very, very selective about his choice of subject matter, and he was a great admirer of Shakespeare. And, quote, he wrote, "He was the greatest authority on the heart of man." However, Verdi was still saying, no, I'm not writing anymore. And Giuseppina counseled patience to recording. She said, "Let the stream find its way to the sea." So what Ricordi did, he managed to convince Verdi to collaborate with Boito in a revision of Simone Boccanegra. And it was either this time or shortly after 1881 that they began active collaboration in Otello. And Verdi initially referred to it as Iago, which is very interesting. He was the one, the hinge person in all of this. But work was slow. Verdi wrote to Boito, "Farm affairs, mineral baths, hot weather, and, let's face it, my inconceivable laziness have stood in the way." When the opera was ready for production, rehearsals were held in absolute secrecy. Verdi reserved the right to cancel up until the last minute. Otello premiered in Milan, February 5th, 1887. It was quite a success. There were 20 curtain calls there, 20 curtain calls. And Arturo Toscanini was playing second cello at that premiere. And he wrote, "Otello is a masterpiece. Go on your knees, mother, and say Viva Verdi." Isn't that wonderful? All right, Otello is one of the most intense operas in the standard repertoire. The libretto of Boito is very, very faithful to the essence of Shakespeare, and then you have the musical genius of Verdi. The three leading roles are among Verdi's most demanding, both vocally and emotionally. Another point to consider now when you're hearing this, it's interesting, 2 weeks ago we heard Il Trovatore. All right, so there's Verdi working at white-hot heat in his late 30s, 40, all right, he's just producing all of these. And now he's in his late 60s, early 70s, all right, that he's working on this. And you're going to hear a difference in the music itself. You're going to hear a difference in the forms. His usual style, each act would have arias, duets with different people. There'd be pauses in between. His style in Otello is very compact, very intense. The audience is even forced to keep the emotions in check. There's no place to applaud after an aria. Things just keep going. All right, you can't do anything until the curtain falls at the end of the act. So this affects the performers as well, because the intensity of their performance isn't diminished. They have to wait for the applause to be over, still in character and wait, and then continue. But they also don't have time for a little rest in there if they need it. It just keeps going. So the libretto is excellent drama, excellent. Boito brilliantly adapts the shape of the Elizabethan drama, but he puts it in 19th century libretto. This takes a lot of knowledge and sensitivity. Shakespeare is in singable Italian verse. It's not line for line, it's not a total translation, but again, he's very good at capturing the meaning and the essence of what is happening here. He strips the play to its essentials, in fact, even to less than its essentials, because he knew that Verdi's music world would add another dimension. And so this adaptation is very skillful and it's very uncluttered. He doesn't use the first act of Shakespeare's Othello. So all 4 acts take place on Cyprus. So the only unfortunate thing is that what is left out, the last confrontation between Otello and Desdemona's father, is omitted. Okay, and this refers to their elopement, all right? He marries her without the father's permission. And the father says, "Look to her more, if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived her father, and may thee." There's kind of an important backstory in there, because that's sort of planting a little seed, in his subconscious. Okay, we're going to go right into now listening to the music. Act 1 of the opera opens to the storm, the raging storm, and the chorus is narrating the progress of Otello's ship going through. The other main characters have already arrived in Cyprus, and the ship is sighted as the storm builds in intensity. And it's probably one of the most brilliant storm music in all of opera. The orchestra's beginning includes all this chromatic undulation. We can't really see through the mist. The picture of the storm is just masterful. You have woodwinds representing lightning, hear splashes of water and waves. The Italian tradition of the storm can be traced back to Rossini, and I thought this was very interesting. Before him, it really can be traced to Beethoven, the Pastoral Symphony, the Sixth Symphony, where he has the storm scene. Well, once Italians heard the storm scene in that symphony, just about every Italian opera included a tempesta. This was great. Okay, so we're going to hear now a little bit of the chorus, The Ship in the Storm, the prayer to God to save the Lion of Venice, which is Otello. Iago, in an aside to Roderigo, declares, may the sea be her tomb. We already see what he's like. All right, and at that moment, however, the ship is saved. Here's the storm. Hear it? So the ship is saved, and Otello enters with a mighty shout of exultate, and we get our first look at him. And this immediately establishes him as a majestic, noble presence, a mighty warrior who defeated the Turks and defeated nature. He was able to get through that storm with no problem. Now, musically, he really has the moment just about all to himself. And by the way, this type of entrance was Verdi's idea, to have him come out like that. The horns play chords with some strings going on, but it's really a wonderfully stirring passage. It's the first impression we get of Otello's greatness. And he tells the awaiting crowd, rejoice, the Turks have been drowned at sea. We in heaven deserve the glory. We did our part, and the storm finished him off. So we'll listen to that. I wanted to take this time, this is probably a good time to tell you about the production you're going to see. There are two things. First of all, this particular, the staging on this is glass walls, movable glass walls, and there'll be projection of different things to show the different sets. Verdi and Boito came up with, and this is in the play, also, you start with the storm. It's a huge, huge space. Here you are, on land waiting. So here's this bigness. And as the play moves along, as the opera moves along, it gets smaller and smaller and ends up in their bedroom, right? In Otello and Desdemona's bedroom. Very, very intimate. So what they're doing with these, and we'll see if it works, but what he's doing with these glass structures then is making them smaller and smaller. So that's how he's dealing with the setting. Also, there is, this is the first time that Otello has not been made up to look like a person of color. So that is also going to be very interesting to see, because there are definite references to his color. He's called the Moor. There is racism inherent in this text from Iago. You hear it. So what they were saying is that they were trying to show his otherness in another way. I'll tell you my opinion. And then certainly, I mean, it's a difficult subject because we certainly don't want anybody to be offended. However, I also feel if we just ignore the idea of racism, we're kind of not really dealing with it. And especially in this time, this is a conversation we still need to be having. So that's my humble opinion. We'll see if it works. I'm not quite sure how we would be portrayed as the outsider. Oh yes, and the other thing is that it doesn't take place back then. It takes place in the 19th century, late 19th century Italy, in the Risorgimento. So again, I'm not sure where the Turks fit in with all this, but we'll find out. Okay. So we just, finished off the Turks. Here we go. And the crowd is so thrilled, and they sing about victory to Otello. So Otello leaves the stage, and just as that happens, Iago begins his plotting. All right, he resents this other fellow, Cassio, who was promoted over Iago to be captain. All right, so he's resenting this. And Iago also says that if he were the Moor, he would not wish an Iago around him. Okay, now, stay with me here. Rodrigo, another person, secretly in love with Desdemona. All right, Iago promises Rodrigo Desdemona while also giving us an insight into his views on women. He says, "I've yet to encounter a woman's vow I could not break." So, in the next scene, a crowd gathers around the bonfire. The fire is praised and compared to love. There are allusions to the bride and groom. And the scene is very calming and kind of puts you at ease in the first moments of this scene. So here is the crowd now singing the fire song. Very pretty. To be doing, right? Okay, so now, Iago, quite the manipulator. He goads Cassio, who can't hold his liquor, into drinking too much by toasting the marriage of Otello and Desdemona. Cassio gets drunk. Iago instigates a fight between Rodrigo and Cassio. They begin to fight, and a crowd gathers. All right. Suddenly, Otello appears. And once again, he musically dominates the moment. And he sings, "Abbasse le spade," put down your swords, totally a cappella, followed by a fortissimo chord from the orchestra. And for the next 11 measures, he's again accompanied by the strings, one more orchestral chord. And you just hear his anger being aroused at this point. All right, so here he is, "Put down your swords." Those R's, you can just hear the anger coming through there. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Okay, so he demotes Cassio. This is important. All right, Cassio's in trouble. All right, so we've seen Otello the victor. We've seen Otello the governor. Now it's time for Otello, the devoted husband and lover. Now at this point, Boito wanted Iago on stage, watching the love scene and commenting cynically. But Verdi insisted that he really needed a pure love duet, just the two of them, before he showed Iago's poison, working on the relationship. So basically the duet, remember these are newlyweds who have just been reunited. So each one praises the other. They're full of love, admiration, respect, beautiful, ravishing phrases. Beautiful, lush, harmonic language. And you'll hear the duet in its entirety this afternoon. I'm just going to play a little bit, but just do be aware of these very, very sensual harmonic changes and chromatic language, and it just adds so much color and richness to the scene. So here's a little bit of the duet. Absolutely scrumptious. You're going to love that part. All right, and particularly note, I'm going to play it for you now, the very end of the section. Otello is asking for kisses. Another kiss. This is going to return at the end, and it will make you weep when it returns at the end. But right now, we're still in the good place. So do remember that. We'll hear it again at the end. Okay, so in the second act now, Iago starts to counsel Cassio. Remember, he's in the doghouse. So how do you gain favor back with Otello? He tells Cassio to talk with Desdemona about reinstatement. Cassio goes to wait for Desdemona, and alone, Iago reveals to us his real motivation. And in this, we have, I'm going to read it to you, because this is not from Shakespeare. This is Boito and Verdi. The credo in un Dio crudel. I believe in a cruel God, and your blood is just going to run cold. All right? Because his concept of original sin, instead of blaming Eve, he blames the Creator. He blames God. So, this is what you will hear. I believe in a cruel God who has created me in his image, and whom in hate I call upon. Me, like himself, cruel and vile he made me. From some vile germ or base atom was I born. I am evil because I am man. I feel the primeval slime in me. Yes, this is my creed. I believe with a firm heart, just as the young widow in church, that the evil I think, and which from me proceeds, was decreed for me by fate. This is like the Nicene Creed, but a shadow version of it, right? I believe that the honest man is a mocking buffoon, and in his face and in his heart, everything in him is a lie. Tears, kisses, glances, sacrifice, and honor. And I believe man to be the sport of a wicked fate, from the germ of the cradle to the worm of the grave. And after this derision comes death. And then, death is nothingness. Heaven is an old wives' tale. Isn't that something? Yeah. So, he doesn't fear hell. There's nothingness. You know, he's a nihilist. Okay. Now, really, when you think about it, the fact that Otello appointed Cassio captain in his place really doesn't warrant this kind of hatred. You know, why is he hating him so much? But anyway, this little part underscores Iago's evil nature even more. It's just totally out of proportion. Totally out of proportion. Now, Iago is so successful also because he doesn't look the part of the villain. All right? He should be young and handsome. Shakespeare makes him out to be about 28 years old. And Cinzio Giraldi, who's the author of the original story where Shakespeare got Othello from, he says of Iago, an ensign of a most handsome presence, but of the most villainous nature that the world has ever known. If he did not possess this great charm and the appearance of honesty, he couldn't be the deceiver that he is. So we're going to hear now a little part of his credo.
Ti spinge il tuo timone, e il tuo timon son io, e me trascina il mio, nel quale ho credo inesolato in Dio.
Okay, this goes on for about 5 minutes, and it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Okay, so now Iago watches Cassio and Desdemona. Otello appears, and Iago setting up the doubts now. Othello's curiosity and anger become aroused, but at this point, this is a stroke of genius on Iago's part. He counsels Othello to be aware of jealousy and to be careful, not to be jealous. He urges Othello to be on his guard. Isn't that a switch that he's doing there? All right, we'll hear a little bit of that. So just beware of jealousy. Slithery, you know? Okay, so you have the sinister, sinuous kind of music. Then the music changes. Desdemona is singing. Othello hears her, and he declares, if she be false, then heaven mocks itself. And her song reassures me. Listen to the music, it's simple, almost folk-like. So beautiful. Okay. So, she enters, Desdemona enters, innocently asking for Cassio's reinstatement. Othello refuses, and she persists. You know, you just want to say, let it go, you know, after a while. But, all right, she asks if something is bothering him. And he said, my head hurts. So she takes out a handkerchief to bind his head, and he throws it to the ground. Emilia, Iago's wife, picks up the handkerchief. Okay. Othello then sings, wondering about the reason for her unfaithfulness. Is it his age? Is it his color? This is part of the text. His heart is broken. In the meantime, Iago forces Emilia to give him the handkerchief. Otello had given this handkerchief to Desdemona as a token of love. All right, and now it's going to be used against him. So now you have a quartet. Iago, I have them already in my power, and now to further this plot, Iago is working. Emilia, cruel and cowardly clutches have won. God keep us always safe from peril. Well, you know, that's not going to happen. All right, Otello, my golden dream of love has been dragged into the mud. Desdemona, give me your sweet words of forgiveness. This is all going on now in this quartet. Translation in front of you. You know, you hear the emotion that's going on. All right, the women depart. Iago advises Otello, think no more about this. Don't worry about it. But the miserable Otello turns on him, crying that Iago has already robbed him of his happiness by planting suspicion in his mind. And he sings now and farewell glory. Say goodbye to his happiness, to his peace of mind. All right, Iago tells Otello of Cassio talking in his sleep of Desdemona, as though they were lovers. But it was just a dream. He can produce real evidence. All right, he asks if Otello has seen a handkerchief with flowers and is finer than gauze in Desdemona's hand. And he said, yes, I gave it to her as a pledge of my love. And the music contains almost a childlike simplicity, underscoring his vulnerability. Iago said that he saw it in Cassio's hand just yesterday. And then Otello explodes, and there's absolute rage. God grant him 1,000 lives, one is a poor prey for my fury. But first it starts off simply.
Allor vedeste, immambida spina, utres, opera, amor, et sottile.
In fact, the music has 7 piano markings. That's how it's supposed to be played. 7 piano markings. Fazzoletto, that's handkerchief. That's where he rages. All right. Now, Act 3, we're in the hall of the castle. Otello and Iago are speaking. Iago is saying that he's going to bring Cassio in and lead him into gossiping. We know this is going to be happening. He suggests that Otello hide. And again, Desdemona comes again, pleading for Cassio, infuriating Otello even more. Wants to see the handkerchief he gave her. She doesn't have it. Okay, so he hides. Well, what happens is Iago asks Cassio then about his latest love interest, Bianca, who's a courtesan. And so Cassio starts giving details. But Otello thinks he's speaking of Desdemona and is just absolutely brutalized, actually. Iago planted the handkerchief in Cassio's room, and Cassio innocently shows it to Iago. Otello is just in despair at this point. And basically, he emerges from hiding and asks, how shall I kill her? He just jumps right to that. In fact, you might as well hear it's just a little bit. Okay. Now, trumpets from outside the castle. You heard some of those trumpets already. There's a combined scene. All right, the cannons are fired to announce the ambassador's arrival, and we hear "Long live the Lion of Saint Mark," which is Otello. And against this backdrop, Iago suggests that Otello strangle Desdemona in the bed she desecrated, and he would take care of costume. See, he's miserable, contrasting that with what is happening with the crowd, cheering for him. It's spooky. We're just going to jump to it along with the Lion of St. Mark. There's the people of Cyprus, all are praising Otello for his victory, the man who stood up to the Turks in nature. But instead of the hero, they see rage. Otello insults Desdemona publicly and repeatedly, throwing her to the ground and exclaiming, "On your knees and weep." And then Otello turns on the crowd and tells them all to leave. Alone, Otello has worked himself into a rage. He actually has an epileptic seizure and collapses onto the floor. In an incredibly chilling scene, Iago enters from the shadow and stands over the fallen Otello, asking, "Who could stop me from killing the lion now?" The chorus is praising Otello in the background, and Iago puts his foot on Otello, proclaiming, "Behold the lion," and waves the handkerchief over Otello and throws it at she prays the Ave Maria. So I'm just going to play a little bit of the Willow song for you. Silently, Otello enters with a sword. The kiss theme from the first act returns in the orchestra, and we see the horrific suffering of Otello, who's remembering his recent happiness. She wakes up on the third phrase. Okay, remember this? She's just woken up with the dinner. Otello accuses her of sin. He says he must kill her because she loves Cassio. So of course she denies this and asks that he summon Cassio to testify, but he tells her that Cassio is already dead. Desdemona, horrified, is pleading for mercy, but Otello tells her it's too late, and he strangles her. After he realizes what has happened, he grieves over her death. He draws a dagger from his robe and stabs himself. Before he dies, he drags himself next to his wife and kisses her. And the music, again, from the love duet comes back here as he asks for kisses. One more kiss. Okay. So when you hear this music, no matter what is happening with the glass walls or what they put people in costumes or whatever, listen to this story and listen to this music. It is magnificent. We are in for such a treat this afternoon. So thank you all.